The rain fell in heavy sheets across the small town of Willowbrook, Vermont, a relentless downpour that had persisted for hours. Amber Hayes stifled a yawn as she leaned against the counter of the Pinewood gas station, the only establishment, still illuminated in the darkening countryside. At 26, with honey-blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and warm hazel eyes that crinkled when she smiled, Amber had been working double shifts for months now, days at the gas station and evenings studying nursing at the local community college. The bell above the door jingled, and Amber straightened up immediately. A man stumbled in, completely drenched, water pooling around his boots on the worn linoleum floor. Despite his sodden appearance, Amber noticed his kind eyes and the apologetic smile that softened his features. "Sorry about the mess," he said, gesturing to the puddle forming beneath him. "Nasty weather out there." "Don't worry about it," Amber replied with the genuine smile that had become her trademark in Willowbrook. "What can I help you with?" The man ran a hand through his wet, dark hair. "This is embarrassing, but I need to fill up my car, and I've realized I left my wallet at the hotel." He glanced outside at a modest sedan parked by the pump. "I'm trying to get back to Burlington in time for my niece's birthday tomorrow morning. Is there any way I could pay electronically later?" Amber hesitated only briefly before making a decision that would alter the course of her life, though she couldn't possibly know it then. "How much do you need?" "A full tank should be about $100. Amber reached into her back pocket and pulled out her own wallet. "I'll cover it." The man's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly." "Consider it a good luck gift," Amber insisted, swiping her personal card at the register. "Your niece deserves to have her uncle at her birthday." "I can transfer the money to you right now from my phone," he offered, already reaching for his pocket. Amber shook her head. "Not necessary, just pay it forward someday." The man looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. Gratitude, perhaps, or curiosity. "I'm Jack, by the way, Jack Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. "Amber Hayes," she replied, shaking it firmly. As Jack filled his tank outside, Amber returned to her textbook, highlighting passages about cardiovascular care. She was determined to become a nurse, to help people like her grandmother Martha, who had raised her after her parents abandoned her at age 8. Martha had been Willowbrook's most renowned candy maker until rheumatoid arthritis had severely limited her mobility. Now it was Amber's turn to care for her, juggling work, school, and home responsibilities with stubborn determination. Jack returned to the store looking marginally drier. "Thank you again, Amber. I won't forget this." She waved away his thanks. "Safe travels, Jack. Hope your niece has a wonderful birthday." After he left, the night settled back into its quiet rhythm. Amber never expected to see Jack Reynolds again. She certainly never expected to learn that the ordinary-seeming man in the rain was actually Jackson Reynolds, the reclusive founder of Neurosync Technologies, worth an estimated $18 billion. The following morning, Amber was sweeping the porch of the small Victorian house she shared with her grandmother when a gleaming silver Rolls-Royce glided to a stop in front of their modest home. The vehicle looked comically out of place on Maple Street, where most residents drove trucks or practical sedans at least a decade old. A uniformed driver emerged, holding an envelope with Amber's name written in elegant script. Confused, she accepted it, watching as the driver returned to the luxury vehicle and drove away without explanation. Inside the envelope, Amber found $10,000 in cash and an invitation to dinner at Le Ciel, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the country, located in Burlington. The invitation was signed simply Jack. "Who was that, dear?" Martha Hayes called from her rocking chair in the living room, where she was working on a small batch of her famous maple candies, one of the few aspects of her beloved craft she could still manage with her arthritic hands. "I'm not sure," Amber replied, staring at the contents of the envelope in disbelief. She explained the previous night's encounter to her grandmother, showing her the unexpected delivery. "It has to be some kind of mistake," Amber insisted, "or worse, some kind of trap. Why would someone give me this much money for a simple act of kindness?" Martha studied the elegant invitation with interest. "Not everyone sees kindness as simple, Amber. Sometimes a genuine act of compassion can be extraordinary to someone who rarely experiences it. But $10,000 and dinner at Litchi, Seal, this doesn't make sense, Gran. Martha handed the invitation back to her granddaughter. Perhaps you should go and find out why. I can't accept this money, Amber protested, and I certainly can't have dinner with a complete stranger. Then return the money when you meet him, Martha suggested, reasonably. As for dinner, take Lisa with you. She's been dying for an excuse to wear that fancy dress she bought for her sister's wedding. Lisa Morgan had been Amber's best friend since childhood. Practical, skeptical, and fiercely loyal, she would certainly provide both protection and perspective. After several phone calls, first to Lisa, who screamed with excitement at the prospect of dining at Le Ciel, and then to the number on the invitation to confirm that Lisa could accompany her, Amber reluctantly agreed to the dinner. She would return the money and politely explain that while she appreciated the gesture, she couldn't accept such generosity from a stranger. What Amber didn't realize was that this dinner would be just the beginning, the moment she had made the simple decision to help a stranger in the rain. She had set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about wealth, independence, community, and ultimately love. The quiet life she had carefully constructed in Willowbrook was about to transform in ways she could never have imagined. And Jackson Reynolds, the billionaire who had walked into her gas station pretending to be an ordinary man, was about to discover that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased with his vast fortune. They had to be earned through honesty, respect, and the courage to be truly vulnerable. Le Ciel was perched on the top floor of Burlington's tallest building, offering panoramic views of Lake Champlain and the Adirondack Mountains beyond. Amber and Lisa arrived 15 minutes early, both feeling decidedly out of place as they stepped into the elevator. Lisa wore her burgundy bridesmaid dress from her sister's wedding, while Amber had opted for a simple navy blue dress she'd worn to her nursing school interview. "I still think this is crazy," Amber whispered as they ascended. "Who pays for someone's gas and then gets $10,000 and a dinner invitation?" Lisa adjusted her earrings, grinning with excitement. "Maybe he's your fairy godfather, or better yet, your future husband." "Stop it," Amber chided, though she couldn't help but smile at her friend's enthusiasm. "I'm returning the money and that's that." When the elevator doors opened, they revealed a dimly lit restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows, crystal chandeliers, and tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy. A maitre d' approached them immediately. "Good evening, ladies. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Reynolds," Amber replied hesitantly. The maitre d's demeanor changed instantly. "Ah, Ms. Hayes, Mr. Reynolds is expecting you. Please follow me." As they were led through the restaurant, Amber noticed several diners glancing their way with undisguised curiosity. At a private table near the windows, a man stood as they approached. Amber's steps faltered. Though he was now dressed in an impeccably tailored suit rather than rain-soaked casual clothes, she recognized Jack immediately. "Amber, thank you for coming," he said, his voice warm and genuine. Then, noticing Lisa, he extended his hand. "And you must be Lisa. I'm Jack Reynolds." Lisa's eyes widened as she shook his hand. "Jack Reynolds, as in NeuroSync Technologies?" He nodded with a self-deprecating smile. "Guilty as charged." Amber's head was spinning. The ordinary man from the gas station was Jackson Reynolds, the tech billionaire whose innovations in neural interface technology had revolutionized medical treatments for paralysis patients. His face occasionally appeared in business magazines that customers left behind at the gas station. You lied to me," Amber said as they sat down, the accusation slipping out before she could stop herself. Jack's expression grew serious. "I never lied about needing gas or about my niece's birthday. I just didn't mention my last name or occupation." "Or that you could have bought the entire gas station instead of asking me to cover $100, Amber pointed out, reaching into her purse to withdraw the envelope. "Speaking of which, I can't accept this." She placed the envelope on the table between them. Jack made no move to take it. "It wasn't a test or a trick, if that's what you're thinking," he said quietly. "I really did forget my wallet at the hotel. My driver and security team were there too. I'd convinced them to let me have an hour to myself driving a rental car. I just wanted to feel normal for a little while. Something in his expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his powerful position, made Amber pause. Before she could respond, a sommelier appeared to offer wine selections, followed quickly by a waiter presenting menus without prices. Lisa jumped enthusiastically into discussing wine options, while Amber remained silent, studying Jack surreptitiously. In the soft lighting of the restaurant, away from the harsh fluorescence of the gas station, she noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows. Despite his wealth, he looked tired, perhaps even lonely. After they ordered, Jack turned the conversation to Amber. "Tell me about yourself. What brought you to that gas station in the middle of a storm?" "I work there," Amber replied simply. 5 days a week plus weekend shifts during the tourist season. "And she's in nursing school," Lisa interjected proudly. "Top of her class even with working full-time." Jack looked genuinely impressed. "That's remarkable. What made you choose nursing?" Amber hesitated, unused to talking about herself. "My grandmother raised me. She's been dealing with rheumatoid arthritis for years now. Seeing the difference that compassionate medical care makes, I want to be part of that." As their first course arrived, delicate scallops with ingredients Amber couldn't pronounce, Jack shared stories about his own upbringing that surprised her. Far from the privileged background she'd expected, he described growing up in a small town in Michigan, raised by his grandmother after his parents' divorce. She worked at the local diner for 40 years, he said, a fondness warming his voice. "Taught me the value of hard work and treating people with respect regardless of their station in life. When she passed away during my second year of college, it nearly derailed everything." "I'm sorry," Amber said softly, recognizing the genuine grief in his eyes. "She never got to see what NeuroSync became," Jack continued, "but she's the reason it exists. Her arthritis was similar to what you described with your grandmother. It got me interested in neuroscience and pain management systems." As the evening progressed, Lisa excused herself to the restroom, giving Amber a not-so-subtle wink on her way. "Your friend is very protective of you," Jack observed with amusement. "We've been friends since 3rd grade, Amber explained. "She's practically my sister." Jack nodded thoughtfully, then gestured to the envelope still sitting untouched between them. "About the money. I understand your hesitation, but your kindness meant more than you know. I've been surrounded by people who want things from me for so long that I'd forgotten what genuine compassion feels like." "That doesn't mean you owe me anything," Amber insisted. "Consider it an investment then," Jack suggested, "in your education, in your grandmother's care, whatever you need most." Amber felt her defenses rising. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Jack countered gently. "It's recognition of something valuable, kindness without agenda. That's increasingly rare in my world." Their desserts arrived, an elaborate construction of chocolate and berries that looked too artistic to eat. As they savored the rich flavors, Jack shared his real reason for being in Vermont. "I've been working non-stop for 8 years," he explained. 3 months ago, I nearly collapsed during a board meeting. My doctor said it was exhaustion and stress. He prescribed rest, but I didn't listen. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't remember my own phone number during a press conference. That scared me enough to finally take a break." "So you're hiding out in Vermont?" Amber asked. Jack smiled ruefully. "Trying to remember who I am beyond spreadsheets and stockholder expectations. My assistant booked me into a quiet hotel outside Burlington. I was supposed to stay for 2 days. It's been 2 weeks now." As their evening together drew to a close, Amber felt conflicted. The man across from her wasn't the entitled billionaire she'd imagined. Instead, she found herself drawn to his sincerity, his evident loneliness, and the way he listened to her as if her words truly mattered. When they finally stood to leave, Jack gently pushed the envelope back toward Amber. "Just think about it. No strings attached." Amber hesitated, then slowly picked up the envelope. "I'll think about it." Outside the restaurant, a silver Rolls-Royce waited to take them home. As they settled into the luxurious leather seats, Lisa nudged Amber excitedly. "He's completely into you," she whispered, "and he seems nothing like those arrogant rich guys you dated in college." "We had one dinner," Amber protested, "and my experience with wealthy men hasn't exactly been positive." The car glided through the night, back toward Willowbrook. Despite her protests, Amber found herself replaying the evening in her mind. The way Jack's eyes crinkled when he laughed, how he spoke about his grandmother with such tenderness, the genuine interest he showed in her nursing studies. As the Rolls-Royce approached their small Victorian home, Amber noticed her grandmother watching from the window, a knowing smile on her face. For the first time, Amber allowed herself to wonder if perhaps this strange encounter might be the beginning of something unexpected, and whether she was brave enough to find out where it might lead. What she couldn't possibly know was how quickly her quiet life in Willowbrook would be transformed, or how fiercely she would have to fight to preserve her identity amidst the whirlwind of Jackson Reynolds' world. The real challenges were only just beginning. 2 weeks after their dinner at Le Ciel, Jack had become a regular visitor to Willowbrook. His sleek car no longer drew as many curious stares from the townspeople, though whispers still followed his appearances. He had taken to visiting Amber at the gas station near the end of her shifts, sometimes bringing coffee, other times just sitting on the worn bench outside, talking with her during her breaks. Today, he was helping her restock the snack aisle, his designer watch and tailored casual clothes, a stark contrast to the dusty shelves and fluorescent lighting. "You know, most billionaires don't spend their afternoons stacking potato chips," Amber teased, handing him another box to unpack. Jack arranged a row of barbecue-flavored chips with surprising precision. "Most billionaires are missing out then. This is the most relaxing afternoon I've had in years." "Your definition of relaxation needs serious work," she replied, but her smile was warm. Their easy banter had developed naturally over the past weeks. Jack had proven himself to be thoughtful and surprisingly down-to-earth, bringing books she'd mentioned wanting to read and listening intently to her stories about nursing school. For her part, Amber had gradually lowered her guard, allowing herself to enjoy his company while remaining cautious about his wealth and the vastly different worlds they inhabited. The bell above the door jingled, and Amber looked up to see Diane Mercer, the town's unofficial gossip coordinator and president of the Willowbrook Festival Committee. "Amber Hayes working hard as always," Diane said, her voice carrying across the store. Her eyes widened almost comically when she spotted Jack. "And Mr. Reynolds, what a surprise to see you helping out." Jack stood, extending his hand. "Just call me Jack, please. And I'm afraid I'm more in the way than helping." Diane shook his hand with enthusiasm. "Nonsense, it's wonderful to see such community spirit." Her emphasis made her meaning clear. His presence was unusual and noteworthy. "Actually, this is perfect timing. Amber, we need to discuss the flower festival preparations. The committee meeting is tomorrow night." The annual Willowbrook Flower Festival was the town's biggest event, a 3-day celebration marking the beginning of spring. Local artisans showcased their crafts, food vendors lined the streets, and the centerpiece was always the elaborate flower arrangements competing for blue ribbons and bragging rights. "I'll be there," Amber assured her. "Gran is feeling better, so she wants to contribute some of her maple candies this year." Diane clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. Martha's candies have been sorely missed the last 2 years. They're legendary, you know," she added, turning to Jack. "Martha Hayes's maple candies are a Willowbrook tradition." "I've heard all about them," Jack said with a genuine smile. "Amber has promised I'll get to taste them soon." Diane's eyebrows shot up at this hint of familiarity between them. "Well, Mr. Reynolds, Jack, you should come to the festival yourself. It's in 3 weeks. Nothing fancy like you're used to, I'm sure, but authentic small-town charm." After Diane left, purchases made and gossip gathered, Amber groaned. "By dinner time, half the town will know you're stocking shelves and planning to try Gran's candies." Jack seemed unconcerned. "Is that a problem?" "Not for me," Amber said, "but aren't you trying to keep a low profile, hiding from burnout and all that?" "I was," he admitted, but I'm finding that connecting with real people is more restorative than isolation. After her shift ended, Jack insisted on driving Amber home. As they pulled up to the Victorian house, Martha was sitting on the porch, working on a small batch of candies despite the early spring chill. "You must be Jack," Martha called as they approached. "Come inside before Amber makes you stand out in the cold all day." Jack followed Amber into the house, taking in the worn but well-loved furniture, the framed photographs covering the walls, and the pervasive sweet scent of maple and sugar. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hayes," Jack said, shaking Martha's gnarled hand gently. "Martha, please," she insisted, studying him with shrewd eyes. "So you're the young man who's been occupying my granddaughter's thoughts." "Gran," Amber protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Martha waved away her embarrassment. "Would you like to try your hand at candy making, Jack? I need someone with strong wrists to help with the pulling." To Amber's surprise, Jack removed his expensive watch, rolled up his sleeves, and followed Martha's instructions with earnest concentration. For the next hour, he worked under her guidance, listening to stories about Willowbrook's history and Amber's childhood adventures. When Martha excused herself for her afternoon rest, Jack examined the maple candy he'd helped create. Not bad for a first attempt, right? Amber took a piece, biting into it thoughtfully. "Surprisingly good, actually. You have hidden talents." Jack's smile faded slightly. "Can I ask you something serious, Amber?" She nodded, sensing his shift in mood. "I've been thinking about your nursing school," he began carefully. "You're working so hard between the gas station and caring for your grandmother." Amber stiffened. "I'm managing fine." "I know you are," Jack said quickly. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I'd like to help if you'd let me." "We've been through this," Amber said, placing the candy down. "I don't want your charity." "It wouldn't be charity," Jack insisted. "I've been researching educational foundations. I could establish a legitimate scholarship fund for service industry workers pursuing healthcare careers. You'd be one of several recipients based on merit and need, everything transparent and above board." Amber was silent for a long moment. "Why are you doing this, Jack? We barely know each other." "Because you helped me without hesitation that night," he replied simply. "And because in the past 2 weeks I've felt more like myself than I have in years." Before Amber could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this." Jack nodded and stepped onto the porch to give her privacy, admiring the early spring flowers beginning to emerge in the garden. The call was from Tyler Bennett, Amber's ex-boyfriend from college. They had dated for nearly 2 years before his ambition drove them apart. He'd been determined to climb the corporate ladder, while Amber had chosen to return to Willowbrook to care for her grandmother. Now apparently, he had secured an executive position at Northeast Petroleum and was returning to Vermont. "I'll be in Willowbrook next week," Tyler said, his confident voice bringing back a flood of memories. "I'd love to catch up, Amber. See where things stand." After the call, Amber joined Jack on the porch, her expression troubled. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. "Just complications from the past," she replied vaguely. She hesitated, then added, "About that scholarship idea. I'll think about it." Jack's face brightened. "That's all I ask." Later that evening, after Jack had returned to his hotel in Burlington, Amber sat with her grandmother in their cozy living room, sharing the details of Tyler's unexpected call and Jack's scholarship proposal. "Interesting timing," Martha observed, her fingers working methodically at a small candy sculpture. "Your past and a possible future, both reaching out on the same day." "Jack is not my future," Amber protested automatically. I don't even know what we are." "Friends," Martha suggested. "Or perhaps something more, given the way you light up when you talk about him." Amber couldn't deny the warm flutter she felt when thinking about Jack. His kindness, his humor, the way he listened so intently when she spoke. But there was also the undeniable reality of their different worlds. His life of private jets and board meetings seemed incompatible with her small-town existence. "And what about Tyler?" Martha asked, interrupting her thoughts. "What about him?" Amber deflected. "He made his choice 3 years ago. His career came first." And now? Amber sighed. Now he has the executive position he always wanted. He probably thinks I've been pining away for him all this time. Martha set aside her candy work and fixed her granddaughter with a penetrating look. You've built a good life here, Amber. You're respected in this community. You're excelling in nursing school. Don't let anyone, wealthy newcomer or ambitious ex, make you feel like your choices are less valuable than theirs. The following week brought Tyler to Willowbrook, sleek and confident in his expensive suit, taking Amber to dinner at the town's nicest restaurant, a far cry from Le Ciel, but the fanciest Willowbrook had to offer. He spoke at length about his new position, the condo he'd purchased in Burlington, and the realistic future they could have together now. I always knew we'd find our way back to each other, Tyler said, reaching for her hand across the table. Now I can give you the life you deserve. Before Amber could respond, she noticed a familiar figure entering the restaurant. Jack paused when he saw her with Tyler, surprise and something like hurt flickering across his expression before he composed himself. He gave her a small nod and requested a table on the opposite side of the restaurant. "Who's that?" Tyler asked, noticing the exchange. "A friend," Amber replied, feeling strangely guilty. Throughout dinner, she was acutely aware of Jack's presence across the room. When Tyler excused himself to take a business call, Jack approached her table. "I don't mean to intrude," he said quietly. "I just wanted to let you know that the Scholarship Foundation is officially established. 5 recipients will be selected next month. The application materials are being finalized." "You actually did it," Amber said, touched by his follow-through. Jack smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I keep my promises." He glanced toward the door where Tyler was still engaged in his call. "Your date seems important." "He's my ex," Amber clarified quickly, then wondered why she felt the need to explain. "I see." Jack's expression softened. "Well, I should let you get back to your evening." As he turned to leave, Amber impulsively reached for his hand. "Jack, thank you. For the scholarship. For everything." He squeezed her hand briefly. "You're welcome, Amber." When Tyler returned, boasting about a major deal in the works, Amber found herself comparing his self-centered conversation to Jack's genuine interest in her thoughts and dreams. By the end of the evening, her choice was becoming clearer, though she wasn't yet ready to admit it, even to herself. What she didn't know was that across town, a reporter from a national tabloid had checked into Willowbrook's only bed and breakfast, tipped off about the billionaire tech mogul who had been spending time in the quaint Vermont town. Nor could she have anticipated how quickly her private connection with Jack would become public fodder, testing not only their budding relationship, but also her place in the community she loved. The peaceful rhythm of Willowbrook was about to be disrupted, and Amber's carefully constructed life would soon face its greatest challenge yet. Amber's phone buzzed incessantly on her nightstand, waking her from a deep sleep. Bleary-eyed, she reached for it, surprised to see dozens of notifications flooding her screen, text messages, missed calls, and social media alerts. The most recent was from Lisa. "OMG, Amber, call me now, you're on Celebrity Insider." With growing dread, Amber opened her browser and typed in the website. Her stomach dropped as she saw the headline splashed across the screen. Tech billionaire. Jackson Reynolds' secret small-town romance, gold digger or genuine love. Below the sensationalist headline was a photograph of her and Jack sitting on her grandmother's porch, his hand resting comfortably on hers. The article described in invasive detail how the reclusive tech mogul had been spending time in Willowbrook, Vermont, supposedly romancing a local gas station attendant. It quoted anonymous sources speculating about Amber's motivations and painted their relationship as either a calculated grab for wealth or a publicity stunt. Amber's hands trembled as she scrolled through the article, which included personal details about her life, her parents' abandonment, her college history, even her grandmother's medical condition. The comments section was even worse, filled with cruel speculation and judgment from strangers. Before she could process the shock, her doorbell rang, followed by insistent knocking. She peered through the window to see 3 people with cameras standing on her porch. Paparazzi in Willowbrook. Amber, Martha called from her bedroom. Oh, what's happening? Nothing, Gran, Amber replied automatically, though the situation was rapidly spiraling beyond nothing. Just stay in your room for a bit, okay? Her phone rang again. Jack this time. She answered immediately. Amber, I just saw the article, he said, his voice tight with concern. I'm so sorry, I had no idea they were watching us. There are photographers outside my house, Jack, she whispered, peeking through the curtains again. 2 more had joined the original 3. What do I do? I'm sending security right now, he promised. They'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone until they arrive. Within half an hour, 2 stern-looking men in suits had dispersed the paparazzi, at least temporarily, and were stationed discreetly around the property. Jack arrived shortly after, his face drawn with worry and guilt. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid by coming to Vermont, he said, as they sat in Amber's kitchen, Martha making tea as if mysterious security personnel and media invasions were everyday occurrences. I should have been more careful. We both should have, Amber replied, still scrolling through messages from concerned friends and co-workers. The gas station manager had called to tell her not to come in today. Apparently reporters were staking it out too. It's not your fault, Jack insisted. This is my life, the constant scrutiny, the invasion of privacy, the wildly inaccurate reporting. But you didn't sign up for this. Martha set 3 steaming mugs on the table. Nobody signs up for a storm, Jack, but they come anyway. What matters is how you weather them. Jack looked at the elderly woman with newfound respect. You're right, of course, but I can help with this particular storm. He turned to Amber. My PR team can issue a statement, set the record straight. I have lawyers who can ensure those photos are taken down. They were taken without permission on private property. And will your lawyers follow me to nursing school? Amber asked, her voice sharper than intended. Will they stand beside me? At the gas station when customers come in just to gawk at the billionaire's girlfriend? Will they explain to my classmates why people are calling me a gold digger? Martha reached over to pat her granddaughter's hand. Breathe, Amber. Jack looked stricken. I never meant for this to happen. I liked being with you, being normal. But that's just it, isn't it? Amber said, the reality of their situation becoming painfully clear. Your life isn't normal, and now neither is mine. The days that followed were a blur of unwanted attention. Though Jack's security team kept photographers away from the house, Amber couldn't escape the whispers and stares in town. At nursing school, some classmates treated her differently, either with newfound interest in being her friend or with thinly veiled resentment. Diane Mercer cornered her after a festival committee meeting. Honestly, Amber, you could have told us you were dating Jackson Reynolds. Think of what this publicity could do for our festival. Perhaps he could be a sponsor. Even Tyler sent a text message. So this is why you weren't interested. Hard to compete with billions. Call me when the fairy tale ends. The only bright spot came when several of her regular customers at the gas station made a point of treating her exactly the same as always. Old Mr. Whitaker, who came in every Tuesday for lottery tickets and coffee, huffed indignantly when she thanked him for his normalcy. Been coming here for 12 years, girl. Takes more than some fancy tabloid. Nonsense to change my routine. Besides, your grandmother saved my sister's wedding 40 years ago with those maple candies of hers when the caterer didn't show. Hayes women have always been special in this town. A week into the media frenzy, Amber and Jack sat on a secluded bench by Willowbrook Lake, one of his security guards keeping a discreet distance. They had been meeting less frequently, both struggling to navigate the new challenges to their relationship. I've been thinking, Amber said, watching a family of ducks glide across the water. Maybe we need to take a step back. Jack had been expecting this, but it still hit him hard. Because of the press. Partly, she admitted, but it's more than that. This whole situation has made me realize how different our worlds are. You can fly off to Tokyo for a business meeting at a moment's notice. I have nursing exams and Gran's doctor appointments and festival committee obligations. Those things don't have to be incompatible, Jack argued gently. I can adapt my schedule. I've actually been rethinking a lot about my work-life balance. But should you have to, Amber challenged. You've built something incredible with NeuroSync. The work you do changes lives. I would never want you to compromise that. Jack reached for her hand. What if it's not a compromise but a realignment? These past weeks in Willowbrook, getting to know you, helping Martha with her candies, even attending that town meeting, I've felt connected to something real. Do you know how rare that is in my world? His sincerity made this even harder. Amber squeezed his hand but pulled away. I think we both need some time to figure out what we really want. Jack's eyes searched hers. Is that what you want? Time apart? I think it's what we need, she replied softly. He nodded slowly, respecting her decision despite the pain evident in his expression. I understand, but Amber, this doesn't change how I feel about you. After they parted ways, Amber walked through town, barely noticing the curious glances from neighbors. She had done the sensible thing, created space to think clearly away from the intensity of their connection and the chaos of the media attention. So why did it feel so wrong? During their separation, Jack threw himself into surprising new pursuits. He signed up for cooking classes with a local chef in Burlington, focusing specifically on traditional Vermont confectionery. Remembering Martha's stories about the community center that had closed 5 years earlier due to lack of funding, he reached out to Willowbrook's mayor about potential revitalization projects. Meanwhile, Amber faced growing tensions at nursing school. Her community healthcare project, a plan for bringing preventative care, services to rural areas through mobile clinics, received unexpected criticism from instructors who had previously supported her work. Perhaps you should focus on more practical proposals, her advisor suggested, something less ambitious. The implication was clear. Some believed she was now looking for ways to spend her billionaire boyfriend's money rather than create realistic healthcare solutions. Frustrated but determined, Amber doubled her research efforts, staying late in the library to strengthen her project's financial feasibility section with detailed budget analyses and grant application strategies. One evening, as she was leaving the library, she ran into Professor Winters, the most demanding instructor in the nursing program. Working late, Ms. Hayes? He asked, adjusting his glasses. Yes, sir. Revising my community project proposal. He nodded thoughtfully. I read your first draft, Innovative Approach to Rural Healthcare Delivery. Amber blinked in surprise. Professor Winters rarely offered compliments. Thank you, sir. I also read that tabloid nonsense, he continued bluntly. Irrelevant to your academic work, of course. Your proposal will be judged on its merits alone. Relief washed over her. I appreciate that. Excellence doesn't care about who you may or may not be dating, Ms. Hayes, he said, already walking away. Remember that. 3 weeks into their separation, Jack received news that would complicate matters further. His company's board had approved an international expansion plan that would require his presence in Tokyo for at least 2 years. The timing was perfect professionally. NeuroSync's neural interface technology had gained significant interest from Japanese medical research institutes, but personally, the prospect of moving halfway around the world from Amber felt impossible. In Willowbrook, problems were brewing at Pinewood gas station. The owner, Harry Pinewood, had been struggling financially for months. After calling Amber into his office, he delivered the devastating news. I'm selling the station, Amber. Can't keep up with the maintenance costs, and the big chain made an offer I can't refuse. They'll take over in 6 weeks. Will they keep the current staff? Amber asked, thinking of her co-workers, many of whom had families depending on their income. Harry looked away. They're bringing in their own management team. Said they might keep 1 or 2 current employees, but no guarantees. That evening, Amber sat with Martha on their porch, sharing the news about the gas station while they worked on candies for the upcoming flower festival. What will you do? Martha asked, her arthritic hands carefully shaping the cooling maple syrup. Look for another job, I suppose, Amber replied. Though with nursing school intensifying next semester, I was hoping. To reduce my hours, not start over somewhere new. Martha was quiet for a moment. You know, there's an envelope with $10,000 still sitting in your dresser drawer. Amber shook her head firmly. That's not an option, Gran. Pride is an expensive luxury sometimes, Martha observed mildly. Before Amber could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Just drove by the gas station. There's a for sale sign already up, but get this, rumor is the buyer might not be the chain after all. A suspicion formed in Amber's mind. She immediately called Jack, breaking their 3 weeks of minimal contact. Did you buy the gas station? She demanded when he answered. His hesitation told her everything. Amber, I can explain. So you did, she interrupted, disappointment and anger rising. Behind my back. I only found out about the sale yesterday, Jack said quickly. Harry called me. He knew I had the resources and thought I might want to invest in the town. And your solution was to secretly buy it? Amber's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Without talking to me first? I was going to tell you, Jack insisted. I was planning to call you tomorrow once the paperwork was finalized. My intention was to keep it operating as is, retain all the current employees. That's not the point, Amber exclaimed. You made a major decision that affects my life without consulting me. This is exactly the power imbalance I was worried about, Jack. You can just wave your billions around and rearrange people's lives. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. You're right, Jack finally said, his voice subdued. I overstepped. I was trying to help, but I should have talked to you first. I don't need rescuing, Amber said firmly. I need a partner who sees me as an equal. That word, partner, hung between them, loaded with implications neither had explicitly voiced before. I do see you as an equal, Jack replied softly, in all the ways that truly matter. I have resources that could help, and it's instinctive for me to use them. But you're right, and I'm sorry. Amber sighed, her anger fading but her resolve strengthening. Jack, we need to have a serious conversation about us, about what happens next. No more grand gestures or secret purchases. I'd like that, he agreed. There's something important I need to discuss with you too, about NeuroSync's expansion plans. They agreed to meet the following day. As Amber hung up, she didn't know that across town, a delivery truck had just arrived at the community center site with preliminary supplies for renovation, or that in Jack's hotel suite, architectural. Plans for a combined candy shop and healthcare outreach center lay on his desk. Another well-intentioned but unilateral plan that might further test their fragile understanding. The stage was set for a reckoning, not just between Amber and Jack, but between two fundamentally different approaches to life, problem-solving, and love. The morning of their planned meeting, Amber woke to troubling news. Mayor Peterson had called an emergency town council session regarding the Willowbrook Flower Festival. With just 10 days until the event, the city had announced a 70% budget cut, citing unexpected infrastructure expenses. This is a disaster, Diane Mercer lamented during the hastily arranged committee meeting. We can't possibly maintain the festival's standards with barely a third of our usual budget. The Flower Festival wasn't just a tourist attraction, it was the heart of Willowbrook's cultural identity. Local businesses depended on the influx of visitors, and for many artisans, it represented a significant portion of their annual income. What if we scaled back, someone suggested. Focus only on the flower competition and cancel the peripheral events. Amber thought of her grandmother, who had been working for weeks to prepare her maple candies for the festival. Martha had spoken of little else, her arthritic hands pushing through pain to create her signature treats. This festival represented her return to the community after years of limited mobility. We can't scale back, Amber said firmly, standing up. This festival matters too much to too many people. Unless you have $10,000 hidden somewhere. Amber, I don't see how we have a choice, Diane replied, her usual poise cracking under stress. Amber took a deep breath. What if we raise the money ourselves? We still have 10 days. How? Several voices asked simultaneously. An idea began forming in Amber's mind, one that would require community involvement rather than a single wealthy benefactor. Gran mentioned that when she was young, Willowbrook used to fund community projects through cooperative efforts. Everyone contributed what they could: time, skills, resources. Diane looked skeptical. That was 50 years ago, dear. Times have changed. But the spirit of Willowbrook hasn't, Amber insisted. What if we turned this budget crisis into an opportunity to bring everyone together? Martha's maple candies are legendary. We could produce them on a larger scale as a fundraiser. The committee began discussing possibilities: bake sales, craft auctions, sponsored activities. By the meeting's end, they had a tentative plan but remained uncertain about reaching their funding goal in such a short time frame. As Amber left the town hall, her phone vibrated with a message from Jack. "Looking forward to our talk. Meet at the lake at noon." Her conversation with Jack now had an additional dimension of complexity. She needed his help with the festival, but after their argument about the gas station, she was determined not to let his wealth become the automatic solution to every problem. When they met at their usual bench overlooking the lake, Jack immediately sensed her preoccupation. "What's wrong?" Amber explained the festival crisis. "The committee is trying to organize fundraisers, but it's a lot of money to raise in 10 days. Jack nodded thoughtfully, clearly restraining himself from offering an immediate financial solution. "What's the current plan?" "We're going to try selling Martha's maple candies and other local specialties. Everyone's contributing what they can." She studied his face. "You're dying to write a check right now, aren't you?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I'm learning restraint." His expression grew serious. "Amber, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about equality and partnership. You were right. I shouldn't have made decisions that affect you without your input, regardless of my intentions." Amber appreciated his directness. "Thank you for understanding that." "Before we discuss the festival," Jack continued, "there's something else I need to tell you. NeuraSync is expanding into Japan. The board wants me to relocate to Tokyo for 2 years to oversee the new research partnerships there." Amber felt a pang of loss even though they'd been apart for weeks. "When would you leave?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." Jack took a deep breath. "Initially, I thought this expansion would force a choice, my company or whatever is developing between us. But what if it doesn't have to be either or?" "What do you mean?" "These weeks in Willowbrook have changed me," Jack explained. "I've been reconsidering what success really means. NeuraSync's technology helps people with mobility challenges. That's meaningful work. But the way I've been running the company, isolated from the real people we're trying to help, isn't sustainable." He reached for her hand, and this time Amber didn't pull away. "What if we established NeuraSync's rural healthcare division here in Vermont?" he proposed. "I'd still need to travel to Tokyo periodically, but the headquarters could remain here. We could integrate your mobile clinic concept as a practical application of our neural interface technology." Amber was stunned by the scope of his vision. "You want to build a corporate division around my nursing school project?" "It's a brilliant concept that aligns perfectly with our mission," Jack said earnestly. "But more importantly, I want to build a life that includes both my work and the people I care about. You, this community that's welcomed me. I don't want to choose between worlds anymore." The sincerity in his eyes moved her deeply, but Amber remained practical. "That's an enormous business decision, Jack. Are you sure it makes sense financially?" He smiled at her, prioritizing his company's interests. "Actually, it's sound strategy. Lower operating costs than our Silicon Valley offices, proximity to excellent medical research facilities at the University of Vermont, and potential tax incentives for rural development. The board is cautiously supportive, pending a formal proposal." Amber allowed herself to imagine the possibility: Jack establishing roots in Vermont, her mobile clinic concept becoming reality, neither of them having to abandon their dreams or principles. "As for the festival," Jack continued, careful with his phrasing, "I'd like to offer support, but as a participant in the community effort, not as a sole benefactor. What if I help coordinate the candy production? Martha could supervise while I provide the labor. These hands have been getting quite skilled at candy pulling." Amber laughed, remembering his earnest efforts in her grandmother's kitchen. "That's actually perfect. Gran's been wanting to increase production, but hasn't had the physical stamina." "I also have a proposal for the gas station situation," Jack added. "The purchase is proceeding, but I've established it as a worker-owned cooperative. The current employees will have majority ownership through a trust, with profits shared equitably. I've removed myself entirely from the management structure." Amber was impressed by how thoroughly he'd addressed her concerns about power imbalance. "You've really thought this through." "I want to get this right, Amber," he said simply. "Not just the business aspects, but us." She squeezed his hand. "Speaking of getting things right, we should probably address the festival funding before diving into our relationship status." Jack laughed. "Priorities. I like it." Over the next week, Willowbrook transformed into a hive of coordinated activity. Martha's kitchen became candy-making central, with Jack and several volunteers working in shifts under her exacting supervision. When photos of the billionaire tech CEO dusted in powdered sugar hit social media, the narrative shifted from scandalous gossip to heartwarming community participation. Other residents contributed what they could. The local brewery created a special Festival Bloom beer, with proceeds going to the fund. Artists donated works for auction, and even skeptical Diane Mercer opened her historic home for a ticketed tour. Amber divided her time between festival coordination, nursing classes, and helping Martha manage the increasingly sophisticated candy operation that had taken over their home. One evening, she arrived to find Jack and her grandmother deep in conversation about modernizing production methods while preserving traditional techniques. "If we adjust the cooling process slightly," Jack was saying, "we could double output without affecting flavor or texture." Martha nodded approvingly. "You have good instincts for this, Jack. Reminds me of my Harold, always tinkering, always improving." Amber paused in the doorway, struck by the easy rapport between her grandmother and Jack. Martha had never compared anyone favorably to her late husband before. "You two seem to be getting along well," she commented as she joined them. Martha patted Jack's hand. "This young man understands the importance of doing things properly, quality over expediency." "High praise from the Candy Queen of Willowbrook," Amber teased, though she was genuinely touched. 3 days before the festival, the committee held a final meeting to assess their fundraising progress. Through combined efforts, they had raised nearly $7,000, impressive but still short of their goal. "We've done everything possible," Diane conceded. "Perhaps we should prepare to scale back some events." "Actually," Amber interjected, "I have one more idea." She explained a concept she and Jack had developed, a demonstration of NeuroSync's assistive technology that could help artisans with mobility limitations continue their crafts. Jack has offered to bring prototypes for people to try, with a suggested donation for participation. The demonstration became the festival's unexpected highlight. Visitors from neighboring towns came specifically to see the technology in action, particularly after Martha demonstrated how neural interface gloves allowed her to create intricate candy designs despite her arthritis. The final fundraising total exceeded their original budget by 20%. On the festival's opening day, Willowbrook's town square bloomed with flowers of every variety. Martha's candy booth, staffed by a rotating team of volunteers, sold out within hours. The gas station's new cooperative ownership was officially announced, with all current employees retaining their positions. As dusk fell and string lights illuminated the square, Amber found Jack admiring a particularly elaborate orchid display. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, joining him. "Remarkable what people can create when they work together," he agreed, his eyes conveying he meant more than just flowers. They strolled through the festival, stopping occasionally to chat with townspeople who now greeted Jack as one of their own, rather than as an outsider or celebrity. The initial media frenzy had faded, replaced by a genuine respect for his contributions to the community. "I submitted my proposal to the board this morning," Jack told her as they reached the lake's edge, where festival lanterns reflected on the water's surface. "NeuroSync Vermont will focus on rural healthcare applications, beginning with a pilot of your mobile clinic concept in 3 counties. Jack, that's wonderful, Amber said, genuinely excited. When will you know if it's approved? It already is, he revealed with a smile. Preliminary operations can begin next month, with full implementation by fall, coinciding perfectly with your nursing school graduation. Amber felt a surge of emotion, pride in her project's viability, gratitude for Jack's belief in her ideas, and a profound sense that their different worlds were finally finding harmonious alignment. The community center renovations are progressing too, Jack continued. The architects incorporated your suggestions for combining healthcare education spaces with traditional craft workshops. Martha has agreed to lead the candy-making program once it opens. She'll love that, Amber said softly. Teaching has always been her passion. Jack turned to face her directly. There's one more thing. I found a small house near the lake. Nothing extravagant but comfortable, with a proper kitchen for candy experiments and room for a home office for neurosync work. I'm hoping it might become a home base, even with the travel to Tokyo that will be required. You're really staying in Willowbrook? Amber asked, the full implications sinking in. I'm building a life here, he corrected gently, one I hope includes you in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Amber thought about their journey, from that rainy night at the gas station to this moment of possibility. She thought about how Jack had listened when she challenged him, how he'd adjusted his approach to respect her independence while still offering support. Most importantly, she considered how they'd each expanded their perspectives, finding strength in their differences rather than incompatibility. I think, she said carefully, that we might be ready to define what us means. And what does it mean? Jack asked, his voice hopeful. Partnership, Amber replied simply. Equal voices, shared decisions, mutual respect. 2 people building something together without either losing their identity. Jack's smile was radiant. That sounds perfect. As fireworks illuminated the night sky, a last-minute festival edition funded by their surplus budget, Jack and Amber sealed their understanding with a kiss that promised not an ending, but a beginning. 8 months after that rainy night, at the gas station, the newly renovated Pinewood Station hosted a community celebration. The worker-owned cooperative had flourished, expanding to include a small cafe serving Martha's maple candies and other local specialties. Adjacent to it stood the nearly completed community center, its modern healthcare facilities balanced by traditional craft spaces designed to preserve Willowbrook's cultural heritage. In the center's courtyard, surrounded by flowers reminiscent of the festival that had united the town, Jack formally asked Amber to marry him. The ring he offered was intentionally modest, a family heirloom that had belonged to his grandmother, symbolizing the values they shared rather than material wealth. Yes, Amber said without hesitation, now confident that their relationship had grown from genuine connection rather than circumstance. Martha, watching from nearby with tears in her eyes, summarized it perfectly when a neighbor commented on the unlikely match between a gas station attendant and a tech billionaire. Not unlikely. At all, she corrected gently. Both of them understand what truly matters: kindness freely given, principles firmly held, and love that finds balance even between different worlds. In the end, those are the only real treasures worth having. As Amber and Jack embraced, surrounded by the community that had become home to them both, they embodied the truth of Martha's words. Their journey had proven that authentic connections could bridge any divide, and that 2 people committed to understanding each other could create a shared path forward, one step, one compromise, one act of respect at a time. The simple act of kindness on a rainy night had indeed changed everything, not through grand gestures or financial solutions, but through the gradual, transformative power of 2 people choosing to see beyond their differences to the common values that united them. And in that understanding, they had found their greatest strength.